Right, so big news here in Canada in that Justin Trudeau has been hit with, I believe it's now his second ethics violation or Ethics Act violation, and I'm pretty sure that no other prime minister has ever had that happen. So I think it's pretty damning, as the report, as the title here says, in that people who are still on board with Trudeau, like I have no words for you. Like he doesn't really even represent anything that a lot of liberals represent. Like, to me, it's just he gets along just literally on virtue signaling, like literally just virtue signaling. But let's read a little bit of this article. And by the way, this is CBC, so they're a very pro left outlet. So definitely not pious in any way, shape, or form against Trudeau, at least, if anything, in favor of him. But Prime Minister Justin Trudeau violated the Conflict of Interest Act by trying to influence then Justice Minister Jody Wilson-Raybould to overrule a decision not to grant a deferred prosecution to SNC-Lavalin. The evidence showed here in many ways in which Mr. Trudeau, either directly or through the actions under his direction, sought to influence the Attorney General. Dion wrote in his report Wednesday. The Prime Minister directly and through his senior officials used various means to exert influence over Ms. Wilson-Raybould. The authority of the Prime Minister and his office was used to circumvent, undermine, and ultimately attempt to discredit the decision of Director of Public Prosecutions as well as the authority of Ms. Wilson-Raybould as the Crown's chief law officer. So basically what he did is that he wanted to give SNC-Lavalin a deferred prosecution agreement, which basically, in essence, was the slap on the wrist. And the other problem being in that there's supposed to be a separation of the the executive and the legislative branch, basically, in that they both have their own jobs and they're not supposed to they're not supposed to dictatorially, basically, is what he wanted to do. Uh, Put out something claiming that, or wanting to do something, basically, and that the legislative has its job, the executive branch has its job, and the judicial has its job. So this would be something more for the judicial branch, I believe. So, in other words, Justin Trudeau basically wanted to act as something that only a dictator would do, basically, and that's what we have in Canada, and that Trudeau is more than likely the worst prime minister, at least in a long time. Like I can't think of anyone worse. Harper was, I mean, there was a lot of people that hated him, but if you look at the numbers, he wasn't that bad. We weren't running massive deficits. Economics numbers were all right, not great, but all right. Paul Martin was very moderate liberal. Like we haven't had anyone really that bad in a long time. So Justin Trudeau has, like I said, he basically just gets by on virtue signaling and virtue signaling alone. Like the economy is doing very bad. I seen a new report. I believe it was just last week that another 70,000 private sector jobs have been lost, which is obviously very bad. Um, the cost of housing in Canada, especially, I mean, well, mainly in big cities, but most, 99% of people live in cities, or at the very least cities. The cost of living has gone way up from the carbon tax, all this kind of stuff. And my big question from this is, what more would it take for any Trudeau supporter to not support him anymore? Like, it makes no sense. He just literally got convicted, or not convicted, but um, basically proven that he wanted to act basically as a dictator. And the reason why he wanted to do that, for anyone who isn't aware, is that SNC-Lavalin is the head offices are in Quebec. They might even be in his his riding. So obviously he doesn't want, if the company gets hit with a massive penalty, then that's going to be jobs lost in his district, which means people are going to be less likely to vote for him, most likely. Um, so he had a pretty clear and obvious motive to want to do something like this. I know Jody Wilson-Raybould, who was the person that he was trying to influence, obviously unethically. Um, she did not speak very highly of him, and but basically that he had his mind set. There was no changing in his mind or her mind, and they were very forceful about it. So this is pretty big news in Canada. And like I said, what more evidence or what more could someone say to get you to not vote for Justin Trudeau? Like, I don't see anything. Like, the economy's not doing very well at all. The cost of housing has gone way up. The cost of living has gone way up, mostly due to the carbon tax and other inflationary kind of things. But to me, like, if you're claiming, like, if you're still a Justin Trudeau supporter, like, you, in my mind, you're number one, you're very, very uninformed, and in my mind, you're for lack of a better way of putting it, just an idiot. Like, and it's not in the way that, like, oh, you support the opposite side party from me, you're an idiot. But like, if this had happened to someone like Trump, and there was the economy was on a horrible downturn, and Trump, all he ever did was virtue signal, yeah, I would agree with that anyone who supports Trump is crazy. But it's not. Like, the economy in the U.S., if you look at the economic numbers, basically another good way of putting it, I'll put it a better way, is that foreign investment in the U.S., even in the same industries, is higher than it is in Canada. And in Canada, the dollar's at about 0.7, 0.75, so it's 25 to 30% cheaper to invest in Canada, and yet in foreign investors still on average would rather invest in Canada or in the US, sorry. So in other words, the US is at least 25 to 30% more profitable to invest in than Canada. Like, that's just how bad the Canadian economy is under Trudeau. And I mean, I don't think I'm going to change a lot of people's mind, but I definitely should be changing some people's mind on this, is that Justin Trudeau, I mean, he's more than likely going to get voted out. The big problem with the whole situation is that the Conservatives are not really very conservative, and that's going to really hurt them in the next election after that, because I don't think they're going to fix a whole lot of things, and people are going to recognize that, and they're going to be like, yeah, let's go for some free stuff again. And Justin Trudeau, or probably not him, but someone comparable to him is going to get voted back in, and we're going to go down another rabbit hole. So that's kind of my prediction as far as the next 10 years in Canada or so go. Obviously, I've expressed my support for the PPC. I don't think they're perfect, but they're definitely a hell of a lot better than the Conservatives. I would say they're definitely even better than the Conservatives before Scheer, which the Conservatives before Scheer were all right. Like, they weren't great, but at least the economy was decent. So, and they weren't running massive deficits. Like, just the fact that the PPC wants to limit immigration, not completely get rid of it like a lot of people would claim. They just want to put it at limits that we can actually sustain. That's the one thing that the left never talks about when they talk about people who want to limit immigration. That's, oh, just because they're racist. No, it's because we don't have the housing to bring in an extra 100,000 people on top of what we're already bringing in, which we can't afford. So the people who say that just don't understand economics and or math, most likely both. But I'll leave it there. This was just big news today that, Justin Trudeau's in some hot water, and like I said, if I was advising Justin Trudeau and I was wanting him to do whatever it took for him not to get reelected, and I was advising him to do things that weren't like, going to get him thrown in jail, which I think technically this could, but I don't see what more I could possibly do to make him look worse. And the fact that there's still, I think, about a quarter of the country still supporting him it's insane in my mind. So I'll leave it there. I don't want to talk too much about this issue. If you liked it, make sure to hit that like and subscribe, and stay tuned for more.